In this video, we will be taking a look at a scenario where the African Union never collapsed. This video will mostly focus on the effect this has in World War III, but also the state of North Africa. We begin in episode 23. The Amsterdam Conference is currently taking place to divide up the borders of Africa. In our timeline, the African Union rushed to take as much land as possible, as they came in late, and were running out of time to expand. However, in this timeline, they begin to expand early on. This gives them time to set up provinces. This is huge for the African Union, as this destroys one of, if not the largest reason that they collapsed. This still gives the same result, being the African Union leaving the Triangle Alliance. During and after World War I, the African Union continues to merge the cultures of Carthage and Morocco, which is something they did not focus on after the scramble for Africa in our timeline, as they were more focused on combating the Europeans. They of course still are in this timeline, but they put this second to the issue of the cultures. During World War II, the same events happen, and the African Union joins the war, and the Square Alliance wins. In the peace treaty, they gain the exact same amount of land, but they come out of World War II much more stable. Now, let's officially begin the scenario. After World War II, the African Union and the Old Empire collaborate to divide up Northern Africa into different nations. This takes place the same, however the African Union focuses more on the economical aspects, and begins to set up a new economical alliance with the new nations. This not only strengthens the African Union, but spreads their influence too. The economical alliance is officially born in episode 35, and this strengthened control from the African Union makes it so no borders change in their sphere of influence. After this, the African Union and the Old Empire continue to build their relations. When the Russian Old Empire split takes place, the African Union supports the Old Empire. In our timeline, it is around here that Morocco joined the Cross Alliance, but as the split never takes place here, Russia never manages to gain a strong African ally. This has a massive boost for the Square team. In regards to relations between China and the African Union, they are very positive. They share a lot of the same ideals, and cooperate in trade, making them both large trade partners. Their relations do take a hit though, when the Chinese fully cut relations with the Old Empire and Russia to form the tripolar system. Eventually, the African Union and Old Empire sign a common interest pact, making them a de facto member of the Square Alliance. During the Cold War, the African Union develops its own nuclear program, however, as the people are not in support of the action, they eventually disband the project. This catches the attention of the Old Empire, who sees an opportunity to further improve relations with the African Union. They offer to supply them with 20 nukes for self-defense. The African Union accepts this, and this greatly improves relations, making them close to fully joining the Square team. The only thing stopping this is China. In the Cold War, all three alliances almost completely blocked trade with one another, and the African Union heavily relies on Chinese trade. Another country the African Union relies on for trade is India. In our timeline, when the African Union collapsed, they took the African Union's place as the fourth strongest country, but here, the African Union remains the fourth strongest and India at fifth. Moving on a few episodes, we do however, finally see the African Union begin the process of joining the Square team, after the Old Empire promises a 40% off trade deal with them for all goods that last 60 years. However, right as this begins to take place, a radar in Moscow picks up several nuclear missiles coming from the Old Empire. This turned out to be a false alarm, but before the Russians realized this, they responded with a nuclear attack. This begins World War III. At first, the African Union is in full support of the Old Empire, as they feel that Russia unjustly attacked them without a reason. However, after the Old Empire nukes China, the public opinion of the Old Empire does slightly lower, as they feel the Old Empire has done a similar wrongdoing as Russia. Despite this, they do still support the Old Empire. The war also fully destroys relations with China, as they denounce any ally of the Old Empire, including the African Union. In the war, we see similar events happen, however the fighting in Ukraine between Russia and the Old Empire does go much better, as Galician troops are able to help the Old Empire fight, instead of having to fight Morocco. This actually has a big effect of the Farmers' Union never capitulating, keeping a Square team ally in the war. We also see Norway having more success, as Galician troops are also being sent there too. This causes Russia to demand more troops from the Central Asian allies, making China much more successful against the Cross Alliance. However, it is not going all well for the Circle Alliance, as in East Asia, Korea and Vietnam sign a coalition against China, causing more trouble. In the Americas, we see Texas get blasted by Mexico and Carolina, due to their disadvantageous position. They do manage to hold out though, for now. Back in Eurasia, Russia is beginning to see success. They are able to retake Central Asian land, and see victories against the Farmers' Union and the Old Empire, due to good logistics on their front. This causes the African Union to begin to supply the square team, helping to stop the Russian offensives. This also helps out fighting in Central Asia, where the Old Empire almost fully captures the land around the Caspian Sea. Eventually though, the Russians find out that the African Union is the reason for the square team's success. The Russians demand that the African Union stop supplying them at once, or the African Union will see serious consequences. The African Union brushes this off, until multiple nuclear strikes are seen on the North African coast. That's right, the Russians nuked the African Union, bringing them into the war. Now, you may think this was not a carefully planned decision, but instead made out of anger, but you would be wrong. The Russians believed the only reason for the square team's success was the massive supply coming from the African Union. They believed if they cut the supply off, they would see success, and the only way they could think of doing this was a nuclear strike. However, as soon as African troops arrive to the front line, the tide completely changes. The Farmers' Union is able to fully push Russia out of their territory, invading into Poland. In Ukraine, Crimea is recaptured, and plans are now being set in place for a full-scale Russian invasion. Russia realizes the threat they are in, and comes up with a plan. They plan to fully invade Norway, then move all the troops to the southern front lines. However, this plan is foiled when Finland joins the war. In fact, the Finnish entry into the war pretty much sparks defeat for Russia, as they are now facing invasion from too many fronts. In Central Asia, we see multiple cross-team countries leaving the war, as they feel it is lost, especially after the Russian capital is encircled by Old Imperium and African forces, who take the city. Now, it is just the Old Empire versus China. At this point, the people in China are sick of the war, and throw their government out of office, and the citizen government leaves the war. This causes the rest of the Circle Alliance to exit the war too, leaving the victory to the square team. Now, let's have a look at the peace treaty, but just before, I want to mention one thing. In our timeline, since there was no real winning side, borders were just drawn up giving land to whoever was successful, but because here the square team won, if a country was not on the square team, they will not gain any land, which is why in Asia very few border changes took place. Anyway, let's take a look. In the Americas, Carolina took a lot of Texan land, and the country was split in two. We also see the terrorist organization gain land. To combat this, Carolina makes a defensive pact with Los Angeles. In Europe, the borders see some major changes. The Old Empire gains all the land around the Caspian Sea and much of southern Russia. Both of the Russian vassals are given independence, the northern one gaining land too, however they do lose some to Norway, who has also taken Sweden. Finland took much of Russia too. Poland and Estonia are reformed. Speaking of Russia, they also lose Siberia, as a ginormous Old Empire puppet state is carved out, with the purpose of extracting natural resources. In East Asia, China loses land to Vietnam and Korea. After the war, the Old Empire, India, and the African Union are left as the three sole world powers, as the losing countries are forced to pay bankrupting amounts of reparations. Soon after the war, the issue of the Ethiopian genocide is brought up. The African Union and India decide to collaborate to replace the government. With help from Tanzania, they are able to defeat the country and set up a pro-democratic government that accepts all ethnic groups. In the years after, the North African Economical Alliance eventually leads to these countries joining the African Union, making a very large North African Federation that is an economical powerhouse. I hope you enjoyed this video, as it took a long time to make. It turned out to be a 10-minute video, so I hope you guys like that. The next video will be a conventional mapping video of a WICSO war, dropping on Monday. Thanks for watching.